It's been roughly 6 months since I published my video about the Air75. Ironically, I then predicted the publication would do badly, but in reality, it became the most watched video ever on the channel. I received an additional unit by NuPhy after that, as I had to return the one from the video back to Mr. S, who was kind enough to lend it to me. But I gave the second one away too in my 2021 Q&A video, which seems like such a long time ago. Anyway, as much as I liked the design, it ultimately wasn't for me. At first, the Air60 looks, apart from the obvious size reduction, identical to its predecessor, or in this case, a more befitting name would be a sibling. It's not exactly the same though, which is why after playing around with it for the past couple of weeks, I decided that this time, I'll be keeping it. From the outside, the Air60 is just as good looking, or in my eyes even better looking than the Air75. You have the exact same Coast PBT keycaps, again available in 2 colors, and the same 3 types of low profile gate-run switches, as well as the magnetic feet to lift up your typing spirits. There's also a matching new folio case, which I think is well worth the $19 asking price. Even if you don't travel, it's a nice way to store the board, if for some reason you don't use it for a prolonged amount of time. Plus, it doubles as a tablet or phone stand. The obvious difference between the two is the size. The Air75 is a 75% keyboard, while the Air60 is a 60% one, hence the name. Other than that, we have the same aluminum top frame with a nice brushed finish and the slightly chamfered edges, a semi-translucent bottom housing that lets the RGB shine through, although you won't spot any side glow here, and it's only noticeable when you flip the board around, so don't get too excited. You'll also notice these railings, which offer no functionality but are in my opinion a nice visual touch-up. Spread out to the corners, we have these 4 rubber feet, which are the same skinny teal strips as we find on the larger version. Designed this way for a reason, just like on NuPhy's other 2 boards, the Air60 can be placed atop a MacBook or other laptops, replacing their respective built-in keyboards. All you have to do is line it up and place it down in between the keys. This works for both the older generation of MacBooks as well as the new M1 Pro and Max ones from 2021. I don't have a Windows-based laptop for comparison, but I would assume that there will be models where this won't work. If you are wondering, I measured the feet at roughly 75mm from center to center, and the strips have a thickness of about 1.5mm. So get that ruler out and check for compatibility if this is a use case for you. Moving to the upper half of the board, we have the same magnets that pull in the feet to change the typing angle. It's a neat trick, but I still like this idea more in theory than in practice. For example, if you use the feet, you might not be able to place it atop a laptop anymore, as it can push down on the keys below. You still get a slight angle without them, but it's not as comfortable, at least not for me. The strips are also glued in, and I've heard stories of them going missing on the 75, which is probably why they included 4 extra ones. Those were not included in my box back in October, but I believe that the packaging as well as the included accessories weren't final at the time. Speaking of accessories, in the box you'll get your usual share of goodies, such as a set of replacement Windows caps, 3 extra switches to test out, a great keycap and switch puller, a tiny USB-C to C cable, and a braided and angled USB-C to A cable. Going back to the feet again, just like on the Air75, they're a bit fiddly when you try to put them on without directly looking at them. Kinda like putting on underwear after a shower. You'd be surprised how much of a fight that puny little thing will put up. Lastly, using a new folio case with the feet kinda works, but it will perma-press down on the top row as well as reduce the amount of magnetic suction the board has to keep it in place. But the feet do fulfill their basic purpose. The elevation is nice and I do prefer using the board this way, which is why the implementation bothers me. It would have been less elegant if they used pop-outs like on the K6, but more convenient. I'd also like to state that I'm not much of a mobile typist, so the portability aspect of this isn't something that's at the top of my list or a primary requirement for my keyboards. Neither is it for many of you if what I can spot on Instagram is any indication of where this is being used. If we continue our inspection on the backside, we have the 2 switches, one to change between Windows and Mac and the other one to change between off, wired and wireless mode. Wireless has 2 connectivity options, Bluetooth and the ever-preferred 2.4 GHz via the dongle. The dongle offers much faster wake-up time from sleep and less delay than Bluetooth, and is something I think all wireless boards should have. The latter obviously offers the benefit of being able to connect up to 3 devices and makes switching between phones, tablets or whatever supports a keyboard these days a breeze, but more on that later. Finally, we have the USB-C connector, which this time around is placed on the left side. I suppose this was done due to space limitations, which doesn't bother me as my setup complements this arrangement, but it might be an issue for you. The connector can be used to operate the keyboard in wired mode or for charging. Speaking of charging, thanks to Volta Charger for sponsoring today's video. The Volta Spark uses magnetic snap-safe tips, so you can easily connect all of your devices offering different options so even your most dreaded gizmos like those still equipped with a micro USB can feel a bit more modern among the rest of your power-hungry necessities. I started using the Volta Spark on my desk to quickly switch between keyboards as the cables do support data transfers. I was also looking for something like this to power my phone while being on longer bike rides, as this is a perfect companion for such occasions and can save your device from perma-damage when you fall, while also making it easy to detach when you need that all-important Instagram shot. But it obviously works for more common scenarios too, saving you from unnecessary and expensive repair bills with its design and lifetime warranty, as well as a 30-day money-back guarantee. They also pair perfectly with the Volta Giga Charger, which can push enough power to refill multiple devices at once while keeping desk clutter or travel bag sizes down. Great things do come in small sizes. So say goodbye to bulky adapters and put the power back in your hands with Volta. Click on the link in the description below to learn more. Alright, let's have a look at the functions of this function row-less board. As just mentioned, you have the option to connect the Air60 via the included USB-C cable or switch to the wireless mode. That one gives you the choice of using either Bluetooth or the included dongle. Switching between them is as easy as ever. Just use function and either Q, W, E or R for the 2.4 GHz mode. This might be a small detail, but I wish they would have used the number keys instead of the letters. It's not hard to memorize, but my guinea pig-sized brain would have been more compatible with the first. But this is probably because the numbers row is being reserved for the functions. The connection process is also straightforward. Just hold down function and the corresponding letter for a couple of seconds until the left light strip starts flashing blue or green for the dongle mode. Then pick either Air60 BT 3.0 or 5.0 for the corresponding Bluetooth version. If you're using a dongle, it'll either work out of the box or in my case worked after plugging the dongle in once the light started flashing green during the pairing process. When you turn the board on, it'll also shortly flash blue or green, indicating if you're on Bluetooth or the dongle respectively. Switching between Windows and Mac will rearrange the control and command keys in their respective operating systems, but neither mode will be incompatible with whatever you are connected to. It'll just align with what you're used to in the operating system. You will also notice that the right light strip will either glow blue or white, which correlates to Windows or Mac, another nice quality of life feature. The right strip can also be used to display the battery status by either holding down function ? And then pipe for a temporary display, or the right bracket for a permanent display of power. Again, a very nice quality of life feature. The strips themselves can otherwise be used to display 5 different lighting options, including off. You have a rainbow effect changing from top to bottom, a solid rainbow, a solid single color with 7 options, and a single pulsating mode, again with 7 color options. The strips themselves have 5 levels of brightness, including off, although I just left it at 5, which is bright enough to be visible in a normally lit room during the day. Not as bright are the per key RGBs with 1 level less, that's 4 including off, although I feel that the 4th level here is significantly less visible during the same lighting conditions. Speaking of that lower brightness, I try to capture it on camera as best as I can, but it's really hard to see here, so I apologize if this does not come across as nicely as expected. I'm really terrible at capturing RGB, to be honest. Also, if you're wondering what and why I'm using these keycaps, it's because many of you have asked in the Air75 comments to see this board with shine-through caps, and the only ones I had lying around were these, which are from the K6. The included keycaps don't show off the lighting too well, although personally I think the board looks much better without it anyway, except for the strips. Those are cool. What the keys lack in brightness though, they sure make up in variety, as I've counted 21 lighting options including off. I won't go through all of them as this would take roughly 6 years to complete, but you have your usual rainbow suspects such as a solid color option and per key activated shenanigans to stimulate your cat-like attention span. By the way, if you want to use any of the function keys like the F row or media controls, this is easily done by holding down function and the corresponding number key. The media and volume control worked for both Windows and Mac, while the screen brightness will work with compatible displays for both as well, although I have none of these devices available to me. I assume it should work though, as the icon on Windows does at least show up, but doesn't do anything on my LG C10, but I believe that's a problem with my combination, not a NuPhy one. Interestingly, you also have an additional way of controlling the key backlight using 5 or 6, while the last 2 keys trigger the desktop switch and app launcher shortcuts, which work just fine on Mac, but don't do anything on Windows. If you want to access the regular function row, that is the F keys, you can disable the shortcuts entirely by holding down Function, Tab and F. If you're wondering if it's possible to change those or any other keys, NuPhy has just recently released an update to its software, the NuPhy console, to support the Air60 alongside the 75. I did briefly check it out, but since it came out just a few days before publishing this video, I didn't have too much time to play around with it. There are essentially two parts. First, the RGB configurator, which lets you change and tune existing profiles with more granular controls for colors or the transitions. You can also change the color profile much more quickly using the list, where I counted 22 including off, which means that there's one more in here that otherwise wouldn't be accessible, and that's the game mode. This additional profile lets you set a per key RGB, which you can customize via the Air60 representation on the right. You can draw anything you want with the colors you want, which is pretty cool if you ask me. But it also makes me pity the key brightness, or lack thereof. I think the intended use here is to highlight game-specific keys, or you could use it to highlight shortcuts for video editing, which I actually think would be really useful, if again, I could actually see them. The second part is the profiles and key modifications. This is actually really cool and something I found was missing on the Air75 6 months ago. With the 75, you have the top row of keys, including some special ones that can now be modified using the software. There's your standard share of remappings, keystrokes using modifiers, a fixed set of multimedia keys, and macros. Those let you basically record any keystrokes, including delay, and then bind it to a specific key. Again, a really nice feature and something that actually elevates the value of this board quite a bit, especially for someone like me. However, if you're wondering why I didn't show any results to these configurations, it's because it didn't actually work for me. It is still in beta, the version is 0.1, so this is very early on, but I really hope NuPhy keeps working on this because it's actually really cool. I also want to thank this guy here, which helped me figure out how this works. I don't speak Japanese, so I'm not going to butcher the pronunciation with an attempt, but using YouTube's auto-translate, it was surprisingly easy to understand. So if you want to get a more detailed look at NuPhy console, check out his video. One last thing, the approach is currently very Windows focused, and I hope Mac users will get their fair share at some point. But for now, it's a very limited affair with some caveats. Something we can do right now though are physical alterations. I wasn't able to make any modifications to my Air75 or dare I say it, even peek inside the inner workings due to the screw issue. This time around my effort was met with success, although the screws started to strip again after the third or fourth disassembly, so keep an eye out for this if you plan similar excursions. It's fairly easy to get inside though. First remove the keycaps and then follow suit with these switches before getting to the 10 screws that hold the top and bottom frames together. After that you can separate the two halves, but beware of the ribbon cable that connects to the daughterboard and subsequently to the battery. There's some slack, but not enough to act carelessly. If you want to go even deeper, you have to remove the 5 additional screws on the underside that hold the PCB and the top frame together. With those gone, we can have a closer look at the PCB and the plates separately. The construction of the Air60 is decidedly simple. Considering the size and slim form factor, I didn't expect anything else, and you certainly won't find gaskets or any other fancy custom buzzwords. The plate or lack thereof, as it's the same as the top frame, is made of aluminum. You then have the PCB, which contains a nice message from NuPhy but otherwise looks and feels just like any other pre-build I've seen, which is not a negative point by any means, but just in case you were wondering or hoping for some Easter eggs. We have some pre-looped clip-in stabilizers, which were set up pretty nicely out of the box, and I didn't feel like it would make much of a difference to add additional loop. These are also custom stabilizers, so there's no compatibility with Duroc or Cherries, but then again, this is a low-profile keyboard. Going deeper, we have the daughterboard containing the USB-C connector as well as the mode and OS switches, and the final ribbon cable which is connected to the battery. Unfortunately, that one is glued in pretty tight, so if you ever plan to replace it, be ready. Looking around the construction reveals some space to play around with, which is what I immediately did by adding a layer of foam. At first I tried to cover everything but quickly realized that I needed to cut out around the battery and other elements to make sure everything fit. The foam I used was from the Air60 packaging itself, so no fancy super dense material here. I know it's not the best one, but still a lot better than the incredibly flimsy one from the Q2. I also added a few layers of tape to the underside of the PCB and closed up everything again. Unlike with the Q2, where you would want to keep the number of layers to a minimum to preserve its gasket bounciness, you can technically fill in every nook and cranny here as you won't be blocking anything. Some of you also have asked if the low profile switches can be looped, and yes, they can be looped just as easily or depending on your views with the same amount of difficulty, if not more considering the smaller form factor. So after all these modifications, here's how the board sounds all stuck with the Gateron low profile browns, unlooped and then looped with the added foam and tape. Although it's not world-shatteringly different, I think it's a worthwhile modification if you've got some spare time on your hands. If you want to go even further, I can highly recommend Wildcat's great video on modding the Air75, which should mostly apply for the Air60 as well. If you're thinking about switching the keycaps to something more daring, you can do so too, but there are a few things you should keep in mind. The fact that Gateron switches use the same MX style stems means that you technically have a very large selection of possible caps at your disposal, but the fit won't be the same for all. Take the MT3 caps here. They are super tall and look funky and might be a fun adventure for the curious ones, but the way that they are constructed makes them touch the plate before the switch can bottom out. This means that you will hear and feel some nasty plastic on metal action. Trying out the ever so popular GMKs shows similar issues. They touch the plate, but not as early or sometimes even barely. For a light typist, you might get away with this, but I wouldn't recommend it either, especially considering that GMK will run you more, if not twice the price of the keyboard itself. Then we have the ominous DMK caps, which I mentioned in my in-stock video. These work great. As you can see here, they clear the gap just enough during the bottoming out process to not touch the plate, making this the only viable and sensible choice, especially considering the price too. I always liked the design of the NuPhy Airs, both the 75 and now the 60% version too. The previous model had some quality issues which weren't really addressed in this update, although I don't really think you can call this an update, it's really more of an additional choice. For many of you, this also doesn't seem to be a deal breaker, and I think if you look at what the Air60 has on offer, it's still a very compelling choice, especially in the low-profile mechanical keyboard segment. The issue I had with the inconsistent lettering on the coast caps is also another thing to keep an eye out for. It's almost perfect on the unit that I got, but then again, from reading the Air75 comments, this is a bit of a hit and miss. Some of you had worse, and some of you had perfectly fine experiences. I still find typing on them to be a bit weird though. I don't like the spacing or the profile itself, but this again is something you have to try out for yourself. So at this point you're probably wondering why I'm going to keep it then. Well, the resolution to this might be a bit anticlimactic and has little to do with hardware or software improvement, but actually with traveling. I have begun venturing out into the world again, and on those trips it's sometimes nice to have a more tactile typing experience that doesn't weigh 6 metric tons of thok. The Air60, even if it doesn't seem to be that much at first, is just ever so slightly smaller, so lugging it around has become a much more viable option to me. Airplane trays are notoriously small and flimsy, so you're going to fight for every precious inch you can get. But even if you don't travel, maybe you just like the smaller footprint or enjoy 60% layouts, whatever the case may be, both of them are well designed, subjectively great feeling, low-profile mechanical keyboards. Both have easy access to modifications, with limitations of course, and both have wireless connectivity that will cover most needs, as well as battery life that's sufficient enough to never be a noticeable nuisance. Although I must admit that I think they should have priced this slightly lower. Both start around $110 and you do get a little less with the 60, even though you do gain something in portability. Seeing the first images of the Air60 also didn't make me look twice, but holding it had or has its effects. Besides the added portability, it might also sound a bit weird, but it's more fun and quirky, and I know it's not the most sensible reason, but when did I ever make a sensible decision when it came to keyboards? Hey, thanks so much for watching. Hope this helped you get an overview of the differences and maybe help you make a pass or a purchase. If you do consider getting the 60 or 75, don't forget to use the code CHEESE to get a 10% discount during your checkout. This works for all items in the NuPhy store, so even if you do go for something else, don't forget to use it. Anyway, thanks to NuPhy for sending in the Air60 and to Volta for sponsoring this video, but especially to you for watching it. So, see you in the next one, which for the first time in a while is not going to be about a keyboard. Bye!